Well, the preseason magazines are starting to trickle out, and we saw today where Athlon made their picks for not just the college football playoff, but all of the New Year's Six bowls. I'm going to get to these right now, talking about where Georgia's at. They're at the end. The Orange Bowl, they've got NC State and Notre Dame, an ACC matchup, a quasi ACC matchup there. Of course, there are contractual obligations for the ACC to take Notre Dame every now and then. I think once every 10 years, something like that, if they're available. The Sugar Bowl and the ACC champion or replacement has to go to the Orange Bowl. The Sugar Bowl, Baylor and Texas A&M. Um, we'll see about that. That's kind of a I'm not sure Texas A&M is going to be the Sugar Bowl representative for the SEC this year. The Cotton Bowl, Cincinnati, which would be the Group of Five #1 team, and USC, which would be knocked out of the Rose Bowl, which is a college football semifinal this year. And the Rose Bowl, excuse me, they've got USC not knocked out. That Utah will win the Pac-12. Michigan and Utah playing in the Rose Bowl. I misspoke a second ago about the playoff semifinals. So that would be a pretty consequential game for Michigan. It would also mean that they've not won the Big Ten, and then the college football playoff. These are kind of chalk. Alabama and Clemson in one semifinal. I'm assuming that means that this would be a 2-3. Yes, Athlon is suggesting this would be a 2-3. And then that Georgia Ohio State would play in the Peach Bowl, um, with so this is why Athlon's great and everything. This is right. What I'm about to read to you right now. This is the reason why you want to get the preview edition from us, because we know what the hell we're talking about. You get DAWGSTRUCTION today. You buy that today, you get the preview edition for free. There is no scenario in this world where if Ohio State is the #1 team in the country, they would pick to play a game in Atlanta against Georgia. No, they'd get outnumbered. Even as great as Ohio State's fan base is, and I've seen it live a couple of times. I watched them lose to Clemson in the Orange Bowl down there. They had 80% of the stadium. It was a huge number of Ohio State fans. I saw them at the Citrus Bowl in '92. Ohio State travels. They're not going to play a home game in Atlanta. Nobody is. Maybe Alabama against Georgia. It's not going to happen. This is stupid. If they're suggesting that Georgia, uh, I just I don't know. I mean, I don't know. If Alabama were the one, they would play in Atlanta. If Clemson were the one, they would play in Atlanta. If Georgia were the one, they would play in Atlanta. If Ohio State were the one, they would play in Baghdad before they would play in Atlanta. People are not going to play in Atlanta if they're not the #1. You know, I'm confused here. I'm not certain who Athlon is suggesting the #1 is. If they're saying it's Georgia, this makes all the sense in the world. But no, there is no scenario. No, I would bet my house, my other house, my mom's house, my dad's house, where they're divorced. I would bet all of my in laws stuff. There is no scenario where Ohio State, as the one, and I'm assuming this is them as the one, would play Georgia in Atlanta. I mean, it's just not. This is why this stuff makes no sense. You don't explain who the one is. If it's Alabama, I mean, the only thing I can take from this is that Georgia is the #1 seed, and I don't think that anyone's really picking Georgia. That they're going to be 13-0 coming into the playoff. No one that I know is picking that. So this can't. This is why I mean, critical thinking is necessary. We're not doing enough of that. We're not using critical theory thinking enough. I mean, I can't imagine that. I mean, everybody's picking Alabama as the #1. So naturally, coming into the college football playoff, you would suggest that they're in the #1, which would then mean that they would have the choice. You're telling me that Alabama, because they're scared of Clemson, man, bitch, they would have 80% of the dome against Clemson. I saw that too. It's listen, this is why. I mean, this is really like I'm really going here, but this is so stupid. There's no scenario where Ohio State would pick Atlanta on purpose. They played in Phoenix multiple times. They have no issue going out there. It's not as close as Atlanta. And there are certainly more Ohio State fans in the South than there are in Phoenix. But Ohio State doesn't hurt for fans anywhere. They're going to have people. They're not going to go into a situation where they're the one seed and they're not going to be the crowd at the game. It's not going to happen. So anyway, we just none of that just doesn't make sense. Now Athlon goes on to pick Alabama to beat Ohio State for the national championship, but I can't trust them. That's why we make this, okay? Again, you buy DAWGSTRUCTION today, you get our preview for free. I'm not saying you're going to agree with everything we write in it, but it's not going to be ridiculous. It's not going to talk about how Stetson's going to win the Heisman. It's not going to talk about these fantasies where Ohio State would play in Atlanta as, or Alabama would go and choose to be in Phoenix as the one, or Clemson would choose to be in Phoenix as the one, or Georgia would pick Phoenix to be the one. The only team, speaking of Baghdad, I'm like Saddam screaming and yelling with my finger up. I just need a gun to shoot in the air right now. The only team that would pick Phoenix as their number one would be Ohio State. All these other teams, Atlanta is a not more than 2.5 hour drive. Of course they would play in Atlanta. Now listen, let's let me get off that now, okay? God, that's so stupid. It's been such a good magazine for so long, but that just makes no sense to me in any way. No sense. Okay, I, I'm skeptical Clemson's going to get into the playoff. I'll say it. But I don't know who else you'd shove in there. I mean, we're going to put Texas A&M in. That's not going to happen. Not with Alabama and Georgia in there. Could you imagine the eyes popping out of people's heads? Well, two things. If Texas A&M got through a season without 4 losses, and then secondly, if there were, and more importantly, if there were 3 SEC teams coming into a college football playoff, that won't happen. So I I don't know who the 4 will be. Clemson is just as good as anybody else to sort of suggest that they would be in there. But let's be honest, it could be Cincinnati again, although they do not have Notre Dame on their schedule. They do have Arkansas going off memory. I, there's the playoff is not going to be the same as it was. Um, Boy, you can't easily get the Cincinnati Bearcats up here. Yeah, they don't have a great schedule that pushes them to where you'd want to go. I mean, they got Arkansas and Indiana. That's really all they can do considering the situation they're in. I mean, nobody's going to give a shit if you beat South Florida. They're just not going to. The win on the road against Notre Dame, which I was inclined to believe would happen in the offseason. That's the thing. Now, Notre Dame could sneak in there, but I mean, you're not going to get Notre Dame and Clemson. So, I mean, this is a zero sum situation. I don't think Notre Dame will be there. I don't think NC State will be there. Like this ACC love right now for NC State. Look, I'm all for taking giant turds on people. I am. I get it, but I need NC State to do something that like they're becoming the Texas A&M of the of the ACC, and that's not a good comparison. Now, could Baylor get in there? Maybe. I don't know who the fourth team should be. I know that there should be 3 teams that get in. Those teams should be, and probably in this order: Ohio State, Alabama, and then Georgia. But I'm not 100% saying those 3 will get in. I mean, there's landmines there for for all three of those teams. Y'all want to make fun of Ohio State's schedule? I mean, okay, fine, but I mean they do have to deal with Michigan at the end of the season. They've got to deal with Notre Dame at the start. Wisconsin's on there. You got Michigan State, Penn State. No, I mean they can beat Ohio State, but I don't want to hear about Penn State as long as James Franklin's their coach. That guy's a clown. So there's just not a lot of. I mean, you want to be critical of Ohio State. They're not going to, but they could lose to Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Iowa in theory, Penn State in theory, and Michigan. And I will give them that they could lose in the championship game, although I am extremely skeptical of that myself. When you go over to Dog Post and you check out Georgia's 2022 schedule, they could lose to Oregon. They could lose to South Carolina on the road. That's not going to happen. They could lose to Auburn. That's not going to happen. They could lose to the Gators. That's not going to happen. They could lose to Tennessee. Probably not going to happen. Mississippi State, Kentucky, and in the championship game. But so many of those are not going to happen. Ohio State's got a tougher schedule than Georgia does, in my mind, just looking at it real quick. And I know Alabama does because they're dealing with LSU. They have got to deal with everybody in the West. The game against Auburn is at home, so I'm not sure I buy that. But I mean, look, if if you're the college football playoff and you wind up with these four teams, ignore the rant earlier. Try to ignore it. But let's just say you end up with these four teams. If you're ESPN, you'd probably be pretty happy with this foursome because three of the four are the most watched college football programs of the last 5 years, and you also get Clemson, who has two national championships since 16. So that would be an ideal situation for ESPN and viewership. But I mean, I think at some stage you'd want the West Coast to get incorporated. If somehow Lincoln Riley can get USC into the thing, it would be watched by more people. That's just all there is to it. I think there will be a team we're not talking about that will get into the playoff. I don't know if that's SC. I don't know if that's Utah. I don't know. Utah beats Florida. I think it's time to take them seriously. But not that beating the Gators is some big deal, but coming across the country and all this stuff. Let's see how that game progresses. These four, you tell me what you think down below.